Back here on the Rich Eisen Show, and then back here as well is a friend and friend of the program, Hall of Famer Bob Costas, back here on the program. How you doing, Bob? Good to see you.
Hey, Rich. Hey, Rich. How are you?
I'm doing well. What ballparks have you been in recently? Lay it on
What
me.
ballparks? The last ballpark I was in was Dodger Stadium.
Okay, so
and you spoke with me right after that,
That's right.
and it was right after the Skubal trade, et cetera, et cetera. Before we get into that,
Yes, sir.
Can I weigh in on this whole Browns LSU thing?
Yes.
That's just a blip on the radar, and it's symptomatic of something larger. And it's this. This isn't just corrupt or chaotic. It's both of those things. It's now at a point where it's perverse, but it doesn't. What happens with the Browns and LSU is just a blip on the radar screen, or it's relatively insignificant. Take a step back. When NIL was first suggested, what all of us understood it to mean was this. If a kid is at a university and he happens to have a musical talent, and if the orchestra in that town wants him or her to play in the orchestra, then why shouldn't they be able to be paid even if they're a scholarship athlete? Why shouldn't a guy in College Station be able to make $100,000 from the local car dealer if he's a star quarterback? That's what it meant, not the university directly paying them to attend. Now, there could have been other reforms. There could have been a stipend across the board where everybody who's on scholarship gets the same, whether they're a bench player or a star. They could have done that. And provisions that Dale Brown, for example, at LSU, ironically, talked about years and years ago. Like, I can't reach into my own pocket and pay a kid that I recruited and brought here, give him enough money to fly home because his grandmother died, to fly home for the funeral. All those reforms should have been in place. But the idea that you'll directly pay players to attend a university undermines the exact purpose of what a university is. And all of the university presidents who sit mum because they realize how important the basketball and football programs are to the university, all of them who don't speak up are very much like 99% of the Republicans in Congress and in the Senate who won't speak up even though they know what's happening right in front of them is perverse.
Well, I mean, it all started, Bob, July 1st, 2021. That was when it was first announced that, okay, you know, the NCAA had an interim policy for student athletes to be allowed to do exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
We were on the air that day, and we just were talking like, what does this mean? Like, what will the ramifications be? And we were all holding our breath because we know there's no centralized organization that everyone listens to or cares about or is competent enough. Nobody ran the traps in advance, and everybody's been trying to catch up and trying to corral, for the lack of a better phrase, a stampede. There's no way to try and organize it because of everything that's happened, Bob, you know?
And I think most of the reaction, though, has been to the chaos. I think there were a lot of people that were okay with corruption, but not okay with the subsequent chaos. And what I've seen advanced congressional initiatives, perhaps, it's more to put a cap on it, almost like to have some kind of salary cap that smooths out the chaos. But no one that I can think of, maybe somebody out there, is saying this. It is fundamentally perverse to pay a kid beyond the cost of education to come to your university. Fundamentally perverse. And another thing that always bothered me was during the conversations for a decade or more about this, a standard trope was everybody's getting rich off this except for the athletes who are being exploited. That says implicitly that the education is worth nothing. So if this athlete attends class, and you got to believe under these circumstances, many of them aren't even attending class. And if you play at 4 or 5 different universities, do the credits transfer if you have any credits at all? But in theory, that kid could be sitting next to another student. He's a student athlete, theoretically. Another student whose parents worked multiple jobs to put him and perhaps his siblings through college, saving hundreds of thousands of dollars if he gets a scholarship. And we all know there are studies that say if you have a college degree, you're likely to make much more over the course of your life than if you don't. So the idea that nothing matters here, the education doesn't matter, that's fundamentally perverse. And all of this is an affront to not just common sense, but any principle that should prevail at a university.
For the audience that just joined, that's the voice, as you know, of the 29-time Emmy Award winner, Bob Costas, here on the Rich Eisen Show. Let's jump into the subject matter of the last time we spoke. Tarik Skubal destroying baseball and the Dodgers doing the same thing. And, you know, I guess this is baseball, Bob. At the end of the day, in the interim, the guy has just one win. That's it for the Dodgers. And I know that's not the only telling statistic, but it hasn't tilted the playing field just yet.
Well,
maybe it happens in October at the end of the day anyway, but I give you
his last outing against the Pirates, he got nicked for a few runs in the first inning, and then he settled in and had like 6 strong innings after that. And he's coming off minor elbow surgery in the middle of this season. He wasn't having a season with the Tigers equal to his Cy Young back-to-backs in the 2 previous seasons. But something else about that trade before we get into the larger issue of baseball's economic structure. You said to yourself, when we heard before Skubal wound up being dealt to the Dodgers, that a number of other teams were in the mix. Let's say you're Milwaukee, which has a strong farm system. And I understand, I've spoken with people, they made what they thought was a very strong offer to the Tigers. But why wouldn't you, if you were the Brewers, go a step farther? Why wouldn't you say to yourself that it's very likely that we meet the Dodgers at some point in October, in a division series or in an LCS? In a division series, in 4 of the 5 games, because they build in extra off days for television, we could, in theory, throw Mizorowski and Skubal at the Dodgers, no matter how much better they might be over 162. And in truth, the Brewers have a better record than the Dodgers right now. But we know what happened last October when they had a better record that wound up being swept by the Dodgers in the LCS. Why wouldn't you look at a scenario where Mizorowski and Skubal could pitch potentially 4 or at least 3 of a best of 5, pitch at least 4, maybe 5 if they combined in a game 7 in a best of 7 LCS? Why wouldn't you push all the available chips into the middle of the table to do that? Now, I know that teams have a general model, and that model for the Rays or the Guardians or the Brewers is different than the Yankees or the Dodgers. But aren't there circumstances in which you say, wait a minute, we're going outside that model right now. We've been a consistent contender. We make great use of our limited resources, but we haven't been to the World Series since 1982, and we've never won the World Series. What would it mean to our brand and to our fan base if we could get to the World Series?
So I guess at the end of the day, why not? Indeed.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and the Rays, too, at this point in time.
And, you know, another thought is the Dodgers, and last time I was on with you, people misinterpreted, I guess, or some people did, when we were talking about how smart the Dodgers are as an organization, how they have overwhelming resources, yes, and we'll find out. I don't know all the particulars. None of us do yet. We'll find out if the financial circumstances of the Dodgers change as everything is being looked into in Mark Walters' empire.
Yeah, right.
But we can't deny that they have made very intelligent and effective use of their overwhelming resources. And part of what they might have been thinking about is not so much acquiring Skubal, who's a definite plus, but keeping him away from a team like the Brewers. The Dodgers are playing a long game. Last year, they slow walked to 93 wins, which was the 3rd best division winner. And it could happen to them again. They could have to play in the wild card round again. But all their planning is pushing toward October, getting that deep pitching staff completely healthy and all ready for October. They're going to have a half dozen guys, any one of whom would have been either the ace or no worse than the number 2 pitcher on any other team. And so if Edwin Diaz craps out, as so far he has, okay, one of these starters is going to be our closer. Wroblewski was an all-star. Maybe he's our left-handed piece coming out of the bullpen in combination with somebody else. It's overwhelming the advantages they have. But by adding Skubal and keeping him away from the Brewers, that's another good chess move.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what the Dodgers do every year, right? Is that they certainly folks around here in Los Angeles wringing their hands over the pen stinks. It's terrible. Oh, let's just throw Sasaki out there, and let's get him. Let's get him in a role out of the blue. Kershaw at one point, as you all know. came in out of the pen, first time in his life, and then it all works out because Roberts pushes the right buttons knowing when. But, you do take a look at the Central with the Cubs and the Brewers. Would you say that that's where the biggest challenge might be? I know the Padres have come on a little bit. There's the Braves in the mix as well. The Phillies, with the Diamondback. I mean, you got them up on the screen right here. This is basically your playoff picture in the NL. Or we're penciling the Dodgers in for October again right now.
Yeah. Look, I know that some people don't want to hear this, and it doesn't justify the inequities in baseball's present economic system, but almost any team could win any given short series in October. The Dodgers, now granted it was pre-Yamamoto and Ohtani, but the Dodgers lost back-to-back to the Padres in 22 and to the Diamondbacks from their own division in 23 in the division series. And as an aside, I think baseball ought to put in a rule that says in the first round, in the wild card round, you can't meet a team from your own division. Right now, when you looked at those standings, the Padres would be playing the Dodgers, assuming that the Padres finish ahead of the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers wind up, well, that's not true. The Braves have a lesser record than the Dodgers, but let's say the Dodgers wound up with the third best division record.
Sure.
You'd wind up playing a team that you just sprinted past for 162 games. You wind up playing them in a best 2 out of 3 roll of the dice. That doesn't make much sense. I think you should keep divisional foes away from each other as long as possible when you get to the postseason.
Yeah, Braves in the Phillies, that might be a more feasible scenario as we're currently seeing it play out right now. Where do you stand on the PCA versus Ohtani conversation for the MVP in the NL right now, Bob?
Obviously, Ohtani is the greater player, no disrespect to PCA. But I think even though some of the way people view this has changed over time, the idea of most valuable in the minds of most voters, at least historically, was somewhat different than player of the year. Player of the year, somewhat different than most valuable. Pete Crow-Armstrong likely has a number of great seasons still ahead of him, but this, to this point, is his greatest season. And the impact he's had with his bat, with his defense in center field, and with his base running. Ohtani was once a 50 steal guy. He doesn't run the bases quite the way he used to. For obvious reasons, they got to be cautious. And just as obviously, Ohtani, unicorn that he is, contributes as a pitcher. I think a lot of voters say Ohtani is in the mix. He's going to be first or second every single year, barring injury. He's going to be first or second in the MVP voting every single year. And this is PCA's best year. And he's certainly elevated his team. And the Dodgers, without Ohtani, certainly that would be a huge blow to lose him. But the Dodgers have a lot more going for them besides Ohtani. So if we're interpreting it as this is PCA's career year, and his value to the Cubs might be in this 1 year marginally better than Ohtani. If we have an excuse to vote for someone other than Ohtani, this year we have a good excuse.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Do you think Ohtani should stop pitching, Bob? What do you think?
He doesn't want to stop pitching.
So that's the end.
He doesn't
of that,
want
then.
to.
Then that's it. I mean, because it's Ohtani's world and we're paying rent and you just got to keep him happy.
Yeah, that's right. And the Dodgers want him to pitch in October.
Why not? I guess.
Yeah.
The American League mosh pit. Who emerges? Could be anybody, obviously. The Rays have hit a rough patch. The Red Sox have cooled off since they're 35-5. The White Sox are starting to, perform very well again. There's always the Guardians, which is a difficult team to get past. Any thoughts on this mosh pit, as I mentioned?
Well, again, as we're talking about the haves and the have-nots, no one wants to hear this, but the Yankees are where they are. And if the postseason would start tomorrow, they would have home field in a best 2 out of 3 against the Red Sox, which is a marquee matchup for television. But they've done this largely without Aaron Judge. Max Fried is only now coming back. Carlos Rodon is only now coming back. They were without Bellinger for a while. He came back and homered either last night or the night before. So when they get to full strain,
and Stanton, I think, has run out of calves to strain. I think he's got,
Yeah.
there's only 2 of them, and he's now got
Which
both
is,
of them. Yeah.
which is a shame because no matter how many games he misses during the regular season, he's always been a tremendous October performer. He has like all-time stats in the postseason. But even without Stanton, when you look at the depth of the Yankees pitching, and if Judge is back and their lineup is at full strength, then you have to give the Yankees a pretty good chance to get to the World Series.
Yankees Dodgers again would be something else. That would be,
it would work for television, and a good portion of the baseball world would be up in arms, and with good reason. With good reason. There has not been a team in the bottom half of MLB payrolls to win the World Series since 2015, and that was Kansas City. Fans in general, all the surveys indicate this. Fans in general feel that the deck is stacked against most teams. The Dodgers paid more in luxury tax last year than 16 MLB teams paid in payroll. But maybe the most telling comparison is this. In the last decade, the Pittsburgh Penguins have won the Stanley Cup. Are they in the same economic circumstance as the Pirates? The Lightning has won the Stanley Cup. Are they in the same economic circumstance as the Rays? The Panthers have won the Stanley Cup. Are they in the same economic circumstance as the Marlins? And in the NFL, are the Chiefs, who've won the Super Bowl 3 times in the past decade, are they in the same economic circumstance as the Royals? The NHL has a hard cap, so there's that. The NBA, it's you need a PhD 5 times over to figure out what their cap is, but it exists. And here's a key point about the NBA. In the last 2 finals, you've got the Pacers against OKC, and you got the Spurs against the Knicks. So you take the Knicks out. 3 of those 4 teams not only would be small market teams in MLB, they would never even have a team. They're too small a market to have a team in Major League Baseball. Now, in the NFL, they have a cap, yes, but the problem was solved back in Pete Rozelle days when they decided to share the massive and ever-growing television revenues equally, which is why the Green Bay Packers are not in the same circumstance as the Milwaukee Brewers. They can compete equally with good management and a little luck with New York, Chicago, Los Angeles. Somehow, without getting into all the granular aspects of this, the average baseball fan understands that even if with 3 wild cards and 3 separate divisions, and the 2 central divisions generally grouping teams that are in like economic circumstances, with the possible exception of the Cubs, they understand that there's a way to sneak in there and anything can happen, but that in the big picture, it is not fair.
Well, and we could spend the next hour and 20 minutes finishing my show if you had the time and I didn't have other guests, with you telling me stories about Marvin Miller and Donald Fear and the history of the union. That's a non-starter. The whole everything that you just said is right. There's no question about that. And you also know the history of labor disputes in other sports. The owners aren't really going to sit down and try and figure it out themselves and then come with a reasoned proposal to the players. They're just going to throw it on the players and say, you figure it out. Like that's the way we get a nuclear winter, and even worse potentially, Bob, right? Like, so what's the answer?
Yeah. I know you're a little short on time here.
No, go for it.
I think the approach of the owners this time is going to be to appeal as much as they can to the rank and file. Look, we want a salary cap, but that's not a cap necessarily on any individual salary. It's a cap on overall team payrolls. But we will absolutely offer a payroll floor, so every team has to pay up to that floor. We will also share all of the local media revenues. Now, it doesn't match the NFL.
Right.
But since the collapse of the regional sports networks, a lot of teams really took a hit. But the Dodgers didn't, the Yankees didn't, the Red Sox didn't, the Mets didn't, no matter how they may squander their resources. So if we can, if we can who's that laughing in the background?
That's my guy, Mike Del Tufo. That was a great line, Bob.
So if we can centralize our media revenues that way, that will have a leavening effect. They could offer the players free agency after 5 years rather than after 6. They could increase the minimum salary. They could say, look, we'll improve pensions, which are already very generous in baseball, but we'll improve the pension program. All these things designed to appeal to the rank and file. The last time there was a potential stoppage, it didn't cost any games, like 5 years ago, the issues that were on the table were slightly different, but this is revealing. There's an executive council of the Major League Players Association. All 8 of them, disproportionately very high salaried guys, Scott Boras guys, not a criticism of Boras, he does his job very, very well. They voted 8-0 to reject the owner's proposal. But the players overall, through their player representatives, voted 26-4 out of the 30 teams to accept it. So I think the approach, I don't know all the particulars, but the approach is going to be, hey, we're going to make this better for 90% of you. Half of you are consigned to teams that don't have a really good chance to compete anyway. So why don't we change the overall landscape? And the result is not going to be any one of you standing on a corner rattling a tin cup asking for spare change.
As succinct as you could possibly make it, man. Let's, we're going to clip and save that and hopefully keep replaying it if the two sides don't listen to each other when it all comes down to it.
Last thing, less than a minute.
Sure.
This gets lost on people. Look, the players were right in every way, right on principle, going back to Marvin Miller and all the rest. And the owners didn't help by being duplicitous, and they were caught colluding in the 1980s, all that stuff. But the idea that this always has to be a holy war and that a salary cap is just a principle that we cannot even talk about doesn't take into account this simple fact. A league is a business in which the competitors must simultaneously be partners. The Dodgers can't play an intra-squad game and get the same television ratings. Half the league is responsible for every competition. That should be obvious. You can run a diner down the street under different business principles than a 5-star restaurant on the other side of the street, and they can both be successful on their own terms. But that doesn't work in a league. Why does no one get upset back in the day with whatever Mike Tyson's purse was, or whatever someone won in a golf tournament or tennis? Because those are individual things. For either prize money or what Tyson got or any other boxer got is what the business calculation said their worth was when they stepped into the ring. In baseball and any other sport that has a league, yes, players should be handsomely compensated, and they are, but the league itself has to function. And recognizing that, stepping back and recognizing what should be obvious, the definition of what a league is, as opposed to almost any other business, then there have to be devices in place so that the league runs in not just a more efficient way, but in a way that better serves its customers, who are the fans.
Love it. Well said, Bob, as always, and I'm with you. I totally hear you and agree with you, although I would pay good, hard-earned American dollars to watch the Mets play the Savannah Bananas once. Like, that would be great.
And then when they lost to the Bananas,
I know.
Can you imagine the back page of the New York Post?
Oh, my God. Yes, that's bananas, exclamation point.
That's better than what I was going to say, slipping on a banana peel.
Ladies and gentlemen, Bob Costas right here on the program. Great to see you, Bob.
See you, Rich.
We'll chat again
Okay.
soon. The one and only Bob Costas.